The atmosphere suffocates as her breathing turns erratic, hands trembling beyond control. Everything spins violently as something vile coats her tongue, acidic, scorching, slithering down her throat like liquid fire. She staggers forward, vision fracturing into fragments, the floor beneath her dissolving into quicksand. A strangled gasp tears from her lips, followed by one final shuddering breath. Darkness swallows her whole. The door whispers open. He enters with deliberate slowness, a twisted satisfaction carved into his expression. He observes her crumpled form without emotion. Perfect silence, then barely audible. "I warned you what happens when you defy me." The poison coursing through her bloodstream? That's merely the opening act. But how did paradise become poison? Their first encounter felt like fate intervening. He embodied every fantasy she'd ever constructed, magnetic, devoted, possessing an uncanny ability to say precisely what made her feel irreplaceable. His humor unlocked something inside her no one else had reached. His touch? Pure electricity. Yet underneath that polished exterior lurked something sinister. Something she couldn't quite identify. Initially, the red flags were microscopic. Casual observations about her friendships. Subtle suggestions that they weren't truly friends. Not like him. He'd laugh it off effortlessly, but those words lingered, festering like splinters beneath her consciousness. Then the texts multiplied. Innocent check-ins, concerns about her safety, but the volume intensified. With each notification, care morphed into surveillance. She rationalized it as devotion. He was protective, wasn't he? Genuine concern for her well-being. It added up. She dismissed every intrusion, manufacturing justifications for each boundary violation. After all, who wouldn't treasure a partner so intensely invested? Then control crept in. Subtle at first. An innocent remark about her outfit, casual commentary on her conversations. Nothing alarming enough to trigger suspicion. He became her universe. Naturally, his opinions carried more weight than anyone else's. Right? He was shielding her from hurt. She didn't recognize how rapidly everything disintegrated. The boundaries, the autonomy, the friendships. They evaporated as he infiltrated every corner of her existence. And she permitted it, because wasn't this love's true nature? Wouldn't she sacrifice the same for him? Then came the confrontation. The one that shattered her foundation. It began innocently. An unanswered text, a delayed response. Somehow it exploded. Words transformed into weapons, slicing deeper than imaginable. He accused her of abandonment, apathy, insufficient prioritization. Her heartbeat thundered, head spinning violently. She attempted explanation, reconciliation, but nothing penetrated. "Why can't you love me enough to actually care?" he hissed, eyes narrowing with arctic rage. "I believed you were different. I thought you belonged to me." Those syllables would haunt her eternally, the piercing sting of betrayal, the crushing weight of his disappointment. She desperately wanted to apologize, to repair everything, but the solution eluded her. Reality was warping, distorting, and she felt utterly powerless. That night, sleepless in the suffocating darkness, her thoughts became a tangled nightmare. Was it genuinely a misunderstanding, or was something more malevolent lurking beneath the surface? The truth revealed itself quickly. This wasn't love. This was calculated manipulation, a slow-acting poison that had infected her life from the beginning. But by the time clarity struck, it was too late. The chains had locked tight, and the toxin had already taken root. The cruelest part, her heart still ached for him. Before long, the isolation became unbearable. Her world contracted, and the people she once depended on faded into obscurity. She vividly remembered the last encounter with her best friend, laughter echoing as they discussed meaningless trivialities, fleeting moments of genuine joy. Then that night arrived. His message, disapproval of her socializing with people who couldn't possibly understand her like he did. Subtle as always, wrapped in manufactured concern. "They don't get you, not the way I do. Stop wasting your energy on them." Her friend reached out again. She hesitated. The message glowed on her screen, a small spark of defiance. But then his face materialized in her mind. That expression of profound disappointment, the one that twisted her insides, that silenced every protest. So she swallowed her guilt, buried her conscience, and sent a dismissive reply. The thought of losing him eclipsed everything else. The texts adopted a darker tone, growing increasingly demanding. Every waking second his presence dominated, monitoring, interrogating, commanding. "Why didn't you call? You promised to be home by 8. It's 11 now." Every attempt at distance, even momentarily, he was there, clinging like an anchor dragging her beneath the surface. "Where are you going? Who are you seeing? What's so important that I'm not enough?" She began concealing details. Minor aspects of her day, innocent conversations with others. She'd learned painfully that certain truths, certain realities, ignited his fury. But simultaneously, she couldn't bear confessing her suffocation. She refused to be the one who broke him. Her world compressed further, until she found herself sitting in oppressive silence, awaiting his arrival, dreading whatever came next. His temperament shifted without warning, from sweetness to savage anger. And during those volatile moments, she tiptoed around him, searching desperately for the right words, the perfect apology, whatever maintained peace. But peace never materialized. It remained eternally fragile, perpetually teetering on collapse. One evening, seated together on the couch, he studied her with eyes devoid of warmth. "You've changed," he murmured, voice low and venomous. "You're not the person I met. You're slipping away from me. Don't you want this to work?" She wanted to scream that she was losing herself, that she was drowning beneath the crushing weight of his expectations. But the confession remained trapped in her throat. She wanted escape, liberation from the grip tightening around her chest, but the path forward remained invisible. She'd lost all sense of identity, and the prospect of starting over, of facing existence without him, was paralyzing. But she couldn't deny reality any longer. This wasn't love. This was terror. Fear of losing him, fear of losing herself, and most terrifying, fear of solitude. He'd convinced her that no one else would ever love her. No one else would care. And somehow, that felt more truthful than anything else. That night, as he slept beside her, arm draped possessively across her waist, she stared into the void. The silence was deafening, and within it, she realized something simultaneously terrifying and liberating. She didn't know how much longer she could maintain this charade. The poison had already taken root, and the slow unraveling had begun. The following days dissolved into endless tension. He grew more demanding, his grip on her life constricting with each passing hour. Everything faced scrutiny, every glance, every syllable, every silence. Nothing she did or said satisfied him. There was always some flaw, always justification for his disappointment. One evening, seated across from one another at dinner, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed food around her plate, he lifted his gaze and fixed her with a cold, calculating stare. "You've been distant lately," he said, voice soft but laced with unmistakable frost. "What's happening? Who have you been talking to behind my back?" Her heart stuttered. She hadn't realized the extent of his surveillance, tracking every movement. "No one," she responded quickly, voice betraying her panic. But he saw through the deception, and a smile, one that never reached his eyes, curved his lips. "You're lying." "I can see it written all over your face," he hissed. "You've always been so transparent. Don't think you can hide anything from me." She wanted to argue, to tell him he was being irrational. But the words died in her throat. Instead, she nodded, gaze dropping to her lap. The shame, the suffocating weight of his scrutiny was overwhelming. She hadn't even realized how many pieces of herself she'd hidden away just to maintain peace. But with every secret, every unspoken truth, she felt herself eroding. It wasn't just the lies she told him. It was the ones she told herself. The next several days brought an eerie stillness to their home. He seemed satisfied, almost pleased, as if he'd caught her in some act of betrayal, despite nothing happening. The absence of conflict was worse than the fighting. There was a suffocating calmness, a sense of inevitability, as if the storm was merely gathering strength. She found herself walking on eggshells, attempting to anticipate his moods, to execute everything perfectly, to embody everything he demanded. Every step felt like a catastrophic error, and the relentless pressure to maintain an illusion of happiness became unbearable. Then, one night, everything shifted. He was drunk, a rare occurrence that still filled her with dread. His words were slurred, but his gaze remained sharp, predatory. She could feel the weight of his eyes on her, like a hunter sizing up prey. "Don't you understand?" he said, voice thick with drunken bitterness. "You're mine. You always will be. I'm the best thing that'll ever happen to you." And in that moment, she realized something that shook her to her core. She had been broken long before she even recognized it. The night concluded with him unconscious on the couch, breath heavy and uneven. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer she could endure this. The walls had closed in so tightly she could barely breathe, trapped in a relationship that no longer felt like her own. She had become a prisoner in her own existence, and the key to her freedom was slipping further from reach. The cruelest part? She still loved him. The weeks that followed were identical. If anything, they grew colder, more suffocating. She had mastered hiding her emotions, burying her fears, wearing a mask that concealed the fractures beneath. There were still moments when he'd smile at her, tender and soft, and for one fleeting second, She'd believe repair was possible. Maybe they could return to what existed before. But that was always followed by brutal reality. The looks, the demands, the way he weaponized her past mistakes to keep her subordinate. One afternoon, seated in the living room, staring through the window, lost in a haze of thoughts, her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. A simple check-in. "How are you, darling? Everything okay?" Her fingers hovered over the screen momentarily before typing a response, keeping it brief. "I'm fine, Mom. Everything's good here." She hit send, but her heart sank immediately. She couldn't remember the last time she felt fine. She couldn't remember the last time she told anyone the truth. Not her mother, not her friends, not even herself. The silence in the house was stifling. She could hear his footsteps echoing in the hallway as he approached, his presence filling the air like an oppressive storm. Her chest tightened as he appeared in the doorway, eyes searching her face with that familiar intensity. "Who are you talking to?" he asked, voice low, controlled but laced with an unspoken threat. Her stomach twisted, familiar dread crawling up her spine. It was as if his gaze could strip her bare, uncovering every secret, every lie. It didn't matter that it was just a harmless text to her mother. In his eyes, everything was betrayal, and she knew. She knew he would twist it into something more. "Just my mom," she replied, voice barely above a whisper. He stared at her momentarily, as if weighing her words, before his lips curved into a small, calculating smile. "Your mom?" "Of course." The way he said it made her skin crawl. He didn't believe her. Not for a second. "Maybe you should spend more time with me, don't you think?" he continued, words cutting through the air like a blade. "Less time on your phone, less time thinking about other people. It's just you and me now. You don't need anyone else." Her heart sank. His words were like a noose, tightening around her neck, and she felt it then, with devastating clarity. The isolation was no longer subtle. "It was total, complete. I don't know if I can do this anymore," she said, barely able to breathe as the confession escaped her lips. He froze. For a moment there was nothing. Just silence so heavy it seemed to swallow her whole. His face, once cold and calculating, shifted, eyes darkening. "What did you just say?" She immediately regretted the words, regretted her vulnerability. She tried to backpedal, to retract the confession, but it was too late. The damage was done. In his eyes there was no room for weakness, no room for escape. "You're not going anywhere," he said, voice a soft growl, as if the threat wasn't in the words but in the quiet menace they carried. "You're mine, and you'll always be mine." His words sent ice through her veins, leaving her frozen. She had spoken the truth, but it was the wrong truth. She had given voice to her fear, but it had only made her more vulnerable. She had tried to break free, to reclaim the part of herself she had lost, but he wasn't finished yet. He would never let her go. The air between them thickened, heavy with the weight of his control, and she realized, with a sinking heart, that she was further from freedom than ever before. The illusion of love had become her prison, and now there was no way out. She felt numb, the world around her swirling into an indistinguishable haze. Her mind screamed to run, to break free, but her body was paralyzed by fear of what would happen next. She wasn't sure how much longer she could endure this. She wasn't sure how much more of herself she had left to give. But in that moment, the truth became undeniable. There was no love here, only chains. Days blurred into one another as she existed in a constant state of tension. She no longer recognized the woman she used to be, the woman who laughed freely, who made plans with friends, who held her head high and dreamed of a future full of possibility. That version of herself felt like a distant memory, buried beneath the weight of his control and the suffocating grip of his demands. He had become more brazen in his manipulation. He didn't just want her attention. He demanded it, consumed it, until there was nothing left for anyone else. Her phone, once a tool for connection, was now a tool for surveillance. He would check it when she wasn't looking, eyes narrowing in suspicion over every text, every call. And she let him. Because if she didn't, there would be consequences. The kind of consequences that made her heart race, that made her question whether the bruises of her soul could ever heal. Every day, the same pattern. She would wake up beside him, feeling his cold presence, his body sprawled across the bed like a looming shadow. She'd go through the motions, pretending to be normal, pretending to be happy, but inside she was dying. The smile she wore in front of him was a mask, one she had perfected over time. The words she spoke to him, sweet and soft, were nothing more than a performance. And then, one day, everything came crashing down. It started with a simple question, one she wasn't prepared for. She had been getting ready to leave for work, standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her blouse, when he appeared behind her, his reflection in the glass. His presence was immediate, overpowering, and she could feel the shift in the air, the way it stilled with the promise of something coming. "Where are you going tonight?" he asked, voice calm, but there was an edge to it, a warning that made her blood run cold. "I'm just going to meet some colleagues for drinks," she said, voice trembling slightly, betraying her fear. He didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there watching her, and then the smile came. That dark, twisted smile that never reached his eyes. "You think I don't know what you're really doing?" he said softly. "I know exactly where you'll be." Her heart pounded in her chest as he stepped closer, breath hot against the back of her neck. "You think you can go out without telling me the truth? You think I won't find out?" Her throat closed up. She could feel the walls closing in, the weight of his presence crushing her from all sides. Every part of her wanted to scream, to run, to escape, but the fear held her in place. She had learned long ago that resistance only made things worse. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she whispered, but the words felt hollow, like a lie she told to keep the storm at bay. He stepped back, but only to study her more closely. "I don't believe you," he said quietly, voice low and dangerous. "And you'll regret lying to me." Her stomach twisted. She could see it now, the cracks in his mask. The control wasn't just about what she did. It was about breaking her down piece by piece until she no longer knew who she was, until she was a shell, a shadow of herself. The worst part was how easily he could turn the situation around. One minute he was angry, cold, and calculating. The next he was apologizing, voice soft, regretful, as if the outburst had never happened. "I just care about you so much," he would say. "I don't want to lose you." And in those moments she would believe him. She would feel guilty for thinking he was anything other than the man she loved. The cycle was always the same: love, control, fear, and guilt. And the worst part? She never saw the poison creeping in until it was too late. She had given him everything. Her trust, her love, her freedom. And now, it seemed, she was nothing more than a prisoner in her own home. But even as she stood there, suffocating under his gaze, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered something different. Something she had pushed aside for so long. A voice that said, "You can't live like this anymore." But the question remained, how? How could she escape the cage he had built around her when every exit was sealed shut? Every attempt at freedom met with punishment. The days after that conversation were filled with quiet dread. The air between them was thick with tension, a fragile thread holding them together, and at any moment, it felt like it might snap. She went through the motions of daily life as if everything were normal, pretending that his words hadn't cut deeper than any knife. But inside, something was slowly changing. A small, quiet rebellion was beginning to take root. The realization came to her in the dead of night, when the house was silent, and the only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. She lay there, staring up at the ceiling, his breathing steady beside her. It was in the silence that the truth became undeniable. This wasn't love. Love didn't make you question your every move, your every word. Love didn't leave you feeling empty, like a hollow shell. It didn't strip you of your identity and convince you that your worth was dependent on someone else's approval. But she didn't know how to leave. The thought of it terrified her. It wasn't just fear of the unknown. It was fear of the consequences. She had seen the way he had reacted before, how quickly he could turn from sweet and loving to cruel and vindictive. What would happen if she finally stood up to him? Would he make her regret it? And yet, in the pit of her stomach, something else stirred. Something fierce. Something powerful. A desire to escape, to reclaim herself. The poison had already begun to spread. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to fight back. But the fight would come at a cost. Her chance came unexpectedly, on a Friday evening when he was out with friends. She sat alone in the quiet of their home, the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. It felt like an eternity before she could finally make herself move. The phone in her hand was shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. Call for help. Call someone. Her finger hovered over the number. But then the fear took hold again. What if he found out? What if he hurt her for betraying him? She couldn't do it. Not yet. Instead, she made a decision that felt just as dangerous. She packed a small bag. Just enough clothes, her wallet, her ID. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get her out. Enough to get her away from him. She moved quickly, the familiar weight of fear and guilt settling over her like a shroud. As she walked toward the door, she felt as though she were walking away from the last piece of herself. The woman she had been, the one who believed in love and freedom and hope, was slipping away with every step. But she wasn't just walking away. She was walking toward something else, toward the unknown. The door creaked open, and for a moment she hesitated. The world outside felt foreign and empty, but it was also full of possibility. She stepped into the night, the cool air hitting her skin, and the weight that had been pressing on her chest seemed to lift, just a little. But it was a fragile relief, one that could shatter in an instant. She didn't know how far she would go, or how long she would last, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a choice. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was done being afraid. The escape. The first step. She walked into the night, each step carrying the weight of 1,000 unsaid words, 1,000 missed chances. The world outside felt vast and open, yet she was acutely aware of how small she had become, how contained she had lived. The streets were empty, the lights above flickering softly, as if to reassure her that the world hadn't completely shut her out. But it felt like she was walking into a storm, one that might consume her before she ever had a chance to breathe. Her heart raced as she walked aimlessly, not sure where she was going, just knowing she couldn't go back. She had taken the first step, and there was no turning back now. But doubt gnawed at her. Was she being reckless? Was she running from the only person who ever cared about her? Or was she running toward something? Something she had buried deep inside herself. The thought that he would come after her was a constant shadow, clinging to her with every step. Would he even notice? Would he search for her? He knew her patterns, her routines, the way she would second-guess every decision she made. He could find her, just like he had always done, with a steady hand, manipulating her into staying, trapping her in his cage. But this time it felt different. This time there was a spark inside her, something that told her she had to keep moving, even if it was the hardest thing she'd ever done. She found herself standing at a bus stop, the flickering streetlights casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, sending a jolt of fear through her. She pulled it out, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. "Where are you?" His words, calm, controlled, chilling. There was no emotion, just the cold weight of ownership. The message was simple. "You belong to me." "Where are you going?" Her hand shook as she typed the reply. She could feel her throat tighten, her eyes welling with tears. She wanted to tell him everything, to scream at him, to let him know how suffocating he had been, how much he had taken from her. But instead she typed, "I'm fine. I just need some space." The message was a lie, but it was the only thing she could say. She hit send, and the weight of the lie settled over her. She felt like a coward. She felt like she was betraying herself. But the truth was too painful to voice, even to herself. How had she gotten here? How had she allowed this to happen? Her phone buzzed again, this time more insistent. "Where are you?" The message hit her like a slap, and for a moment she froze. The cold sweat on her palms made it hard to hold the phone steady. She didn't have an answer for him, not one that would make sense, not one that would make him let her go. "I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore." She hit send before she could stop herself. The words final and liberating. The decision had been made, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a surrender. The kind of surrender where you lose everything, even yourself. There was no response, and for the first time, the silence felt like a victory. The minutes stretched into hours, each tick of the clock a reminder of how far she had come, and yet how far she still had to go. The bus arrived, and she stepped on without a second glance at the city she had once known so well. The streets, the parks, the places they had visited together, they were all becoming nothing more than distant memories, faded and indistinct in the rearview mirror of the bus window. She watched as the city slipped away, her heart pounding in her chest. Every inch of her wanted to look back, to turn around and return to the life she had known. But what was left of that life? A life that had been molded by his cruelty, his manipulations, his demands. Was she really leaving? Or was she simply running from herself? The further the bus took her, the more she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She had no destination in mind, no plan. She only knew that she couldn't stay. That being trapped in that house, in that relationship, was a death sentence. But now, with the world opening up in front of her, she couldn't help but wonder if she had just exchanged one prison for another. The bus rattled on, the rhythmic sound of the wheels against the road a constant reminder that she was still moving. And yet, her mind was trapped in the past, replaying every moment, every choice she had made that led her here. Was it her fault? Had she been weak? Or had she simply been too trusting, too blinded by the facade of love he had built around her? She had spent so many months justifying his behavior, excusing his cruelty. At first it had been the small things, the way he controlled where she went, who she spoke to, the way he would twist her words, making her feel like she was the one who was crazy. And then it had escalated. The emotional manipulation, the gaslighting, the slow stripping away of her confidence and self-worth. Every time she tried to stand up for herself, he would push back harder. He made her feel like she was worthless. like no one else would ever love her the way he did. And for so long she had believed him. She had believed that without him, she would be nothing. But now, as she sat there on that bus, she was starting to see the truth. The truth that had been buried so deep beneath the poison of his words. She had been strong all along. She had survived and she had fought. And now, for the first time, she was taking control of her own destiny. The bus stopped, and she stepped off, the city lights now distant, almost forgotten. She didn't know where she was, but that didn't matter. All that mattered was that she was free. Or at least, she was on the path to freedom. She walked down an unfamiliar street, the weight of her past still heavy on her shoulders, but the future felt just a little bit lighter. Her phone buzzed again, and she looked down, her breath catching in her throat when she saw the message. It was from him. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. I'm coming for you." The words sent a chill through her, but instead of fear, there was a strange sense of clarity. She had already made the hardest choice of her life. She had chosen herself, and there was no going back. She stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the phone in her hand, the message still blinking at her with cruel finality. "I'm coming for you." It felt like a shadow over her heart, a constant reminder that escape was never simple. He wasn't going to let her go without a fight. And deep down, she knew he would fight dirty, using every tactic at his disposal to pull her back into his grasp. But what was he coming for? Was he coming to punish her? To make her regret leaving? The truth was, she couldn't be sure. He had always been unpredictable, a storm that could shift in an instant. But one thing was clear now. She could never return to the prison she had been living in. She could never go back to being his. She shoved the phone into her pocket and walked faster, the night air sharp against her skin, biting at her with every step. Her feet carried her aimlessly, unsure of where she was going, but sure of one thing. She couldn't stop now. There was no going back. She had to keep moving. The night stretched out before her, empty and silent, and she was left alone with her thoughts. The city felt foreign now, a place she didn't recognize anymore, a place where she was no longer sure of her place. But in the midst of the uncertainty, something else began to rise within her, a fierce determination. She had made the choice to leave, to fight for her freedom, and now she had to live with the consequences. The aftermath was a storm she was willing to face, no matter how dark or dangerous it might get. She would find her way, piece by piece, even if it meant walking alone in the night. By the time she reached the small diner on the edge of town, she was exhausted. Her legs felt like lead, and her stomach twisted with hunger and nerves. She pushed open the door, the bell above it jingling softly, and stepped inside. The warm glow of the diner's lights was like an oasis in the darkness. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air, a small comfort amidst the chaos. She slid into a booth in the far corner, away from the windows, trying to make herself as small as possible. The waitress came over, a kind smile on her face, and for a moment she allowed herself to relax. "Can I get you something, hon?" the waitress asked, voice gentle. "Just coffee," she replied, voice hoarse. She hadn't spoken much in the last few days, and now that she was alone, it felt strange to hear her own voice. The waitress nodded, then left her to her thoughts. She sat there looking out the window, the cool night air drifting through the glass. Her mind was racing again. What would happen next? Would he find her? Would he come to this diner and drag her back to that life she had just escaped? She tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on the quiet hum of the diner, the normality of it all. But it was hard. His words echoed in her mind. "I'm coming for you." How much longer could she keep running? Her coffee arrived and she took a sip, letting the warmth spread through her. It didn't solve anything, but it helped. A small comfort, just a moment of peace in a world that had become so violent and unpredictable. The minutes ticked by, and she watched the street outside, waiting for something, anything to happen. She knew the calm wouldn't last. It never did, but for now, she allowed herself this brief respite, this quiet before the storm. But then, just as she was beginning to feel a little more grounded, the bell over the door jingled again. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned her head toward the sound. The figure in the doorway was unmistakable, tall, broad-shouldered, with a familiar cold presence that made the room feel suddenly smaller. It was him. Her pulse quickened, breath catching in her throat. For a moment, the world around her seemed to freeze. The hum of the diner, the clinking of silverware, the soft murmur of other customers, all faded into a dull, distant noise. The only thing she could hear now was the pounding of her own heart as she watched him walk through the door. His eyes scanned the room, sweeping over the empty tables, the lone waitress behind the counter, and finally they landed on her. Her stomach dropped, and for a split second she wanted to run, to bolt out of the diner and disappear into the night, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. She watched as he moved toward her with slow, deliberate steps, face impassive, jaw tight. There was no anger in his eyes yet, no fire, but she knew it was there, lurking just beneath the surface. She could feel it, like the calm before a thunderstorm. She tried to keep her composure, trying to gather the pieces of herself that had shattered over the past few months. But she felt small and exposed. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat, suffocated by the weight of the fear that still gripped her chest. When he reached her booth, he didn't sit down. He stood there for a moment, looming over her like a shadow, before he spoke. His voice was eerily calm, like he was trying to convince himself more than her. "I told you, you can't leave me," he said, words quiet but sharp. "You think you can just walk away? Think again." Her hands clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms. She could feel her body trembling, but she refused to show it. This was her moment, the moment when everything would change one way or another. She could feel the weight of his presence, but it no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a challenge. "You're wrong," she finally said, voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. "I'm done. I'm not yours anymore." His eyes darkened, and he leaned in slightly, face inches from hers. "You think you can just walk away, that it's over?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was an edge to it now. "I'll make you regret this. You'll never be free of me." Her chest tightened, but she didn't flinch. She had come this far. She wouldn't let him take her back into that darkness. She wasn't the same person who had walked out of that house. She had shed that skin, and there was no going back. She stood up, legs a little unsteady, but firm. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said, voice gaining strength. "You don't control me, not anymore." For a long moment he just stood there staring at her. She could see the flicker of rage in his eyes, the way his hands clenched into fists, but she didn't back down. She wasn't going to let him break her. He took a step back, face twisted in disbelief. "You'll regret this," he said again, but this time it sounded weaker, like the threat was more for him than for her. With one last, lingering look, he turned and walked out of the diner, footsteps echoing in the silence that followed. She stood there for a moment, breathless, as if the weight of everything that had just happened had settled over her all at once. Then, as if by instinct, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and sent a message. "I'm free." It wasn't the end. Not yet. But it was a beginning, if this story resonated with you. If you saw yourself in her struggle, in her pain, in her journey, you're not alone. Millions of people are trapped in toxic relationships right now, convinced that love is supposed to hurt, that control is the same as care, that isolation means devotion. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. Real love doesn't suffocate. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't make you question your sanity or your worth. The signs are there. They've always been there. The excessive texting, the isolation from friends and family, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the explosive anger followed by sweet apologies, the feeling that you're walking on eggshells in your own life. This isn't love. This is control, and it will destroy you if you let it. So here's what I need you to do right now, and I mean right now. First, if you're in a toxic relationship, screenshot this video. Save it. Come back to it when you need the reminder that you deserve better, that you're not crazy, that this isn't normal. Second, share this video. You might save someone's life. That friend who's been distant lately, that family member who's changed, they might need to see this. They might need permission to leave. Third, comment below with a heart emoji if you've survived a toxic relationship. Let others know they're not alone. Your story could be the catalyst someone needs to finally walk away. Fourth, subscribe to this channel. And hit that notification bell because we're exposing the dark, truths about toxic relationships that nobody else will talk about. We're diving deep into narcissistic abuse, gaslighting, love bombing, trauma bonding. All the manipulation tactics they use to keep you trapped. And if you need resources, if you're planning your escape, I've put links in the description to organizations that can help. Hotlines, shelters, support groups, legal resources. Everything you need to get out safely. Remember, leaving is the most dangerous time. So plan carefully. Reach out to professionals. Don't announce your intentions. Just go. You are stronger than you think. You are worth more than he's convinced you. And you deserve a love that feels like freedom, not a prison. The woman in this story chose herself. She walked into the unknown, because even uncertainty was better than the cage she'd been living in. Now it's your turn. What will you choose? Drop a comment below. Let me know if you need to hear more stories like this. Let me know if you're fighting your way out. Let me know if you've made it to the other side. Your story matters. Your freedom matters. You matter. Don't forget to check out the next video in this series where we break down the exact psychological tactics toxic partners use to trap you and how to recognize them before it's too late. Until next time. Remember, the cage is only locked from the inside. You have the key. You've always had the key. Now use it.